Selena Quintanilla was only 23 when her life was stolen. She had already conquered Tejano music, sold millions of records, and stood on the edge of breaking into the English market. To her fans, she wasn't just famous, she was unstoppable, a young woman who carried an entire culture on her shoulders and made it shine. But behind the glittering costumes and sold-out concerts was a daughter who grew up in poverty, a sister who carried her family's dreams, and a wife who had to fight for her right to love. Selena's life was filled with sacrifice and resilience, joy and heartbreak, moments that defined not only her career but the woman she was becoming before the world lost her. So how did a star so bright, a love story so pure, and a dream so close to being realized end in betrayal? And 30 years later, what does her husband still carry that the world has never fully understood? Selena Quintanilla was born in Lake Jackson, Texas, in 1971, the youngest of 3 children. Her father Abraham had once chased his own dream of music, only to watch it collapse. But when he heard Selena sing, even as a little girl, he knew the dream wasn't over. It had simply passed to her. He formed a family band, Selena y los Dinos, with Selena on lead vocals, her brother AB on bass, and her sister Suzette on drums. At first it was nothing glamorous. They rehearsed in the family garage. They played weddings, quinceañeras, small-town fairs, sometimes for a handful of people, sometimes for nothing at all. The Quintanillas lived hand-to-mouth, their home lost to financial hardship, their lives uprooted into an old converted bus they named Big Bertha. Inside that bus was exhaustion and sacrifice, but also something magical. Selena's voice had a quality that stopped people in their tracks. It wasn't just technical skill, it was charisma, warmth, a joy that radiated even in the most humble settings. People might have come for the food or the dancing, but when she sang, they listened. Abraham pushed the family harder, convinced this was their way out of poverty. For Selena, there was no normal childhood, only long drives, makeshift stages, and endless rehearsals. And yet, she loved it. Even as a teenager, she owned the stage in a way few adults ever could. Her voice blended power and vulnerability. Her smile made strangers feel like friends. She was breaking into a world that didn't want her there. Tejano music, an electrifying mix of Mexican folk, polka, country, and pop, was dominated by men. Women singers were rare, and teenage girls were dismissed outright. But Selena was different. She didn't just enter the space, she redefined it. Recognition soon followed. In 1986, at only 15, Selena won the Tejano Music Award for Female Vocalist of the Year. It was the first of 9 consecutive wins. By the late 80s, Selena y los Dinos had signed with EMI Latin. Her brother AB became her main producer, crafting songs like Baila Esta Cumbia and Como la Flor. Songs that blended Tejano tradition with pop hooks, reaching audiences far beyond Texas. Como la Flor became an anthem, its aching lyrics and soaring delivery turning Selena into the voice of young love and heartbreak. But it wasn't just the music. Selena was a full-force performer. She designed her own stage outfits, sparkling bustiers, sequin jackets, high-waisted pants that became her signature. Fans adored her daring style, and soon her fashion empire, Selena etc., made her a businesswoman as well as a star. By 1994, she stood at the top of Tejano music. Her album Amor Prohibido became one of the best-selling Latin albums in U.S. history. Its singles, Bidi Bidi Bom Bom, No Me Queda Más, and the title track dominated the charts. That same year, she won a Grammy for Selena Live, a groundbreaking achievement for any Tejano artist, but especially for a young woman in a male-dominated industry. Still, Selena wasn't satisfied with being a regional phenomenon. She dreamed of recording in English, of breaking through to mainstream pop. Songs like I Could Fall in Love and Dreaming of You were recorded as part of that vision. Her crossover wasn't just about ambition, it was about representation. Selena wanted the world to see that a Mexican-American woman could succeed at the very top. She wasn't just singing songs, she was opening doors. She was rewriting what was possible for a generation. And while her career was soaring, another part of her life was quietly unfolding, a love story that would define her happiness and her heartbreak. Chris Pérez didn't enter Selena's world as a headline. He walked in quietly, guitar in hand, auditioning for a spot in her band in 1989. Abraham Quintanilla, ever the watchful father and band manager, recognized Chris's skill immediately. He was talented, disciplined, and a natural fit musically. But he was also a long-haired rocker, a heavy metal fan whose rebellious image clashed with the polished Tejano look Abraham wanted. At first, Chris was just another band member. He and Selena traveled together on the same buses, rehearsed on the same cramped stages, shared the same exhausting schedule. But over time, something began to shift. Long nights on the road led to conversations that stretched until dawn. Shared jokes became secret smiles. A friendship grew, and slowly, friendship turned into something deeper. Selena was only 17, Chris was 20, and both knew the risks. Her father was fiercely protective, not just of his daughter, but of her career. Abraham believed Selena's image had to remain spotless if she was to succeed. A romance with a guitarist who looked like a rock rebel didn't fit the picture, so they kept it secret. Their love unfolded in whispers, glances across the stage, notes slipped between shows, moments stolen when no one else was watching. For Selena, who lived her life constantly surrounded by family and fans, Chris became her private world, a place where she could simply be herself, without expectation. But secrets don't stay hidden forever. When Abraham discovered their relationship, his anger was explosive. He accused Chris of being a distraction, of threatening Selena's future. In a moment of fury, he fired Chris from the band, believing separation would end the romance. For most couples, that might have been the end, but for Selena and Chris, the separation only deepened their resolve. They knew what they had was real, and they weren't willing to let it go. In April 1992, they eloped in secret. The decision was bold, even defiant. For Selena, it was an act of courage, choosing love even at the risk of her father's disapproval. For Chris, it was a promise. He would stand by her through anything. When the news broke, Abraham was devastated. But in time, he saw the truth. Chris genuinely loved Selena. Eventually, he accepted him back, and Chris rejoined the band. What had once been forbidden now became part of their family story. Marriage gave Selena something she had never known before: balance. On stage, she was the Queen of Tejano, dazzling crowds in sequins and commanding arenas with her voice. At home, she was simply Selena, a young woman in love. She cooked meals, watched movies, doted on their dogs, and dreamed about the children she and Chris might one day raise. Chris later described their bond as effortless. They laughed constantly, they understood each other's pressures, and they treated each other as equals. Selena, despite her packed schedule, made time for her marriage, refusing to let fame take away what mattered most. To fans, their love was a fairy tale, the perfect pairing of star and guitarist. To Selena, it was a refuge, the one part of her life not defined by expectation or fame. But even as their love story blossomed, destiny was moving in the background, because just as Selena's career and marriage were reaching new heights, betrayal was waiting where she least expected it. The morning of March 31, 1995, should have been ordinary. Selena Quintanilla was at the height of her career, preparing for concerts, recording her long-awaited English album, and balancing her growing fashion business. But that morning, her focus wasn't on the spotlight. It was on a problem behind the scenes. For months, troubling whispers had been circling. Fan club members complained of missing merchandise and unanswered letters. Employees at Selena's boutiques noticed financial irregularities, and the one person responsible, the woman Selena had trusted as both fan club president and boutique manager, was Yolanda Saldivar. At first, Selena defended her. Yolanda had been one of her most loyal fans, someone who had worked her way into the Quintanilla family's inner circle. But as the evidence grew impossible to ignore, Selena could no longer look away. She confronted Yolanda, demanding answers. Abraham and others urged her to cut ties completely. Yet Selena, known for her warmth and loyalty, chose one final meeting. She wanted to believe things could be resolved. That meeting took place at the Days Inn Motel in Corpus Christi. Selena entered room 158 expecting financial records, answers, and closure. What she found instead was fear, paranoia, and betrayal. Witnesses later described the tension. Selena pressed Yolanda for documents. Yolanda stalled, making excuses, weaving stories. At some point, the conversation turned darker. Yolanda produced a .38 caliber revolver she had purchased days earlier. The sight of the weapon shifted everything. Selena tried to leave. Then a gunshot. The bullet struck Selena in the right shoulder, severing an artery. She screamed, staggered, and ran. With blood pouring from her wound, she sprinted down the motel corridor. Guests later described the shocking sight, Selena clutching herself, leaving a trail of blood more than 100 feet long. She burst into the lobby, collapsing on the floor, crying out, "Yolanda, room 158." It was her last act of strength, naming her killer before slipping into unconsciousness. Paramedics rushed her to Memorial Medical Center. For 40 minutes, doctors fought desperately to save her, performing CPR, attempting blood transfusions, working against impossible odds. But the damage was catastrophic. At 11:49 that morning, Selena was pronounced dead. The news spread with unimaginable speed. Radio DJs broke down on air as they announced her death. Television stations interrupted programming. Fans rushed to the hospital in disbelief, holding impromptu vigils in the parking lot. Across Texas and Mexico, strangers wept openly. For the Quintanilla family, it was devastation beyond words. Abraham had lost his daughter, Suzette her sister, AB, his creative partner. For Chris Pérez, it was the collapse of his entire world. The woman he had fought for, the woman he had built his future with, was gone. Selena's death wasn't just a crime, it was a cultural rupture. A young woman who symbolized joy, perseverance, and pride for millions had been taken in an instant, not by a stranger, but by someone she had trusted. The betrayal cut as deeply as the loss. Outside the motel, Yolanda barricaded herself in her pickup truck. For nearly 10 hours, she held police at bay in a tense standoff. With a gun to her head, she threatened suicide, insisting she hadn't meant to hurt Selena. But her words meant little. Fans had already made up their minds. This wasn't an accident, it was a choice. By nightfall, Yolanda surrendered. She was arrested and charged with murder. But the arrest brought no relief. Nothing could undo what had happened in those final minutes of Selena's life. And so the world that had danced to her music the night before now mourned in silence. For millions of fans, March 31, 1995, became the day music lost its brightest star. But the story did not end there. Because as Yolanda awaited trial, another question lingered. What justice could ever be enough for a crime that had stolen so much? When Yolanda Saldivar was sentenced in 1995, many believed justice had been served. Life in prison, with the possibility of parole after 30 years, was meant to ensure she would never again walk free without facing the weight of what she had done. As the date approached in 2025, news outlets reignited old wounds, speculating on whether the woman who betrayed Selena might one day be released. For fans, the very thought was unbearable. For the Quintanilla family, it was a cruel reopening of grief. But the answer was firm. Her parole was denied. After decades behind bars, the courts ruled that she would remain in prison. The decision brought relief to those who feared her release, though it could never erase the loss. For Selena's community, the denial was more than a legal outcome. It was a statement that betrayal of this magnitude carries consequences that last a lifetime. And while justice could never bring Selena back, keeping Yolanda behind bars ensured her memory would not be overshadowed by her killer's freedom. Selena's light remained untouchable. No courtroom decision could ever change that. In the days following Selena's death, Texas fell silent. On April 3rd, more than 60,000 mourners lined up in Corpus Christi to pay their respects. Her casket, surrounded by white roses, became the center of a pilgrimage. Fans sobbed openly as they filed past, many refusing to believe the young woman who had given them so much joy was truly gone. Across the border in Mexico, entire cities held vigils. Radio stations played her music in a loop, her voice becoming both a comfort and a wound. For the Quintanilla family, the grief was immeasurable. Abraham lost not just a daughter but the fulfillment of his lifelong dream. Suzette lost her sister, her partner in rhythm. AB lost his collaborator, the voice that brought his songs to life. But no one was more shattered than Chris Pérez. Just 3 years into their marriage, He had lost his wife, his soulmate, his future. Chris withdrew from the spotlight. For months, he barely spoke, drowning in sorrow and isolation. He later admitted he felt like half of himself had been ripped away. Even music, the one constant in his life, seemed impossible to return to. Yet eventually, it became his lifeline. In 1999, Chris released Resurrection with the Chris Pérez Band. The album was a cathartic tribute to Selena. One track, Best I Can, spoke directly to his grief, the lyrics echoing the ache of moving forward without her. The album won a Grammy for Best Latin Rock Alternative Album, but for Chris the award was hollow. Success was not what he wanted. He wanted Selena. Meanwhile, the Quintanilla family worked tirelessly to preserve her legacy. They opened the Selena Museum in Corpus Christi, filled with her stage costumes, awards, and personal items. They established the Selena Foundation to support children in need. Her boutiques and fan clubs transformed into shrines where admirers could gather. Yet behind the public tributes, tensions with Chris simmered. He often felt excluded from decisions about Selena's estate and memory, deepening his sense of loss. In 2012, Chris broke his silence with a memoir, To Selena, with Love. The book revealed intimate details of their life together. The simple joys of cooking meals, playing with their dogs, laughing on the tour bus, and whispering about the future family they planned. Fans devoured the memoir, grateful for a glimpse into the private side of their idol. For Chris, it was both a confession and a release. Hollywood also helped preserve her story. The 1997 biopic Selena, starring Jennifer Lopez, introduced her to millions who had never heard her sing. For Lopez, the role was transformative, launching her career. For audiences, it was a way to grieve together and to celebrate Selena's spirit. Decades later, the Netflix series Selena the Series reintroduced her journey to a new generation, sparking fresh interest in her music. And then there were the fans, millions who never let her go. In the summer of 1995, just months after her death, Dreaming of You was released. The English-language ballad, meant to launch her crossover career, debuted at #1 on the Billboard 200. It was a historic achievement, proof that Selena's dream had come true, even if she wasn't there to see it. For her fans, the song became an anthem of longing, a reminder of everything she might have been. Life after Selena's death was filled with questions that will never be answered. What if she had lived to dominate global pop music? What if she and Chris had started the family they dreamed about? What if the Queen of Tejano had reigned longer? The answers never came. But out of mourning came something else, devotion. Even in death, Selena remained present, in the songs her fans played, in the murals painted across city walls, in the young artists who cited her as their inspiration. For many, she was not gone, she was eternal. And that devotion, sustained across decades, is why her legacy today is stronger than ever before. Selena Quintanilla's presence never faded. In fact, with each passing year, her influence only seemed to grow stronger. For fans who lived through her rise, her music became a way of holding on to what was lost. For younger generations, her voice became a discovery, fresh, powerful, and immediate, even decades after her death. Her songs remain timeless. Como la Flor, Bidi Bidi Bom Bom, and Amor Prohibido are still staples at weddings, quinceañeras, and family gatherings, where her voice fills dance floors across the world. Dreaming of You, the posthumous English-language ballad, became a bridge between cultures, debuting at #1 on the Billboard 200, a feat no other Latin artist had achieved at the time. To this day, it is streamed millions of times a year, proof that Selena's crossover dream lives on. Her impact wasn't only in music. Selena became a fashion icon, designing her own daring stage outfits, bedazzled bustiers, leather jackets, and sparkling jumpsuits that defined her image. Today, her style continues to inspire. Tribute collections sell out instantly, and young performers cite her as an influence in both music and fashion. In museums and exhibits, her costumes draw long lines of fans eager to stand inches away from the clothes that shimmered under stage lights. Her story is also kept alive through film and television. The 1997 biopic Selena, starring Jennifer Lopez, remains one of the most beloved music films ever made. For Lopez, the role was life-changing. For audiences, it was a chance to celebrate Selena's spirit, to grieve together, and to pass her story down to the next generation. More recently, Selena, the series on Netflix, introduced her to millions of younger viewers, ensuring that her journey remains a living part of cultural memory. Selena's influence crosses genres and generations of artists. Beyoncé has often recalled the day she met Selena briefly at a Houston mall, a moment she says inspired her to pursue music. Jennifer Lopez has admitted she still feels Selena's presence in her career. Becky G, Demi Lovato, and Camila Cabello call her a trailblazer who proved Latinas could dominate mainstream pop. Even artists outside the Latin world, Drake, Katy Perry, and Lady Gaga, have honored her, citing her authenticity and boldness as inspiration. But perhaps the most powerful part of her legacy is how her fans have kept her alive. Social media is filled with remixes of her performances. On TikTok, clips of her concerts go viral to millions of viewers, many of them teenagers who weren't alive when Selena sang her final note. Spotify streams bring her voice to new countries every day. For young people discovering her for the first time, the shock is always the same. How could someone so vibrant, so alive, be gone? Her image is immortalized in Corpus Christi, where the Selena Museum preserves her life in detail, and the bronze statue Mirador de la Flor overlooks the bay. Fans from around the world travel there to leave flowers, letters, and gifts. Her family's foundation funds scholarships and music programs, ensuring that Selena's spirit continues to lift others just as she once lifted a community. Selena's story is not frozen in the past. It is carried forward daily in the lives of those she inspired. For Latinas, she was the first superstar who looked like them, who spoke their language, who proved their culture was something to be celebrated, not hidden. For music fans, she was proof that joy and heartbreak could live in the same song. For her family and for Chris, she remains more than a memory. She is part of their everyday, a light that never went out. And that is the heart of her legacy. Not just that she lived, but that she still lives in every note, every dance, every dream she ignited. For Chris Pérez, silence was unbearable, but devotion became his tribute. For her fans, grief became loyalty, and loyalty became a movement that has endured for 30 years. For the world, Selena is not just a voice from the past, she is a presence in the present, and an inspiration for the future. 30 years later, her songs are still sung, her image still shines, her story still inspires. Selena Quintanilla may have been taken too soon, but her legacy is untouchable. She is, and always will be, eternal. For more emotional stories, check out this video.